Good evening, and welcome to Kingston Liberal Synagogue to this virtual event tonight. It's our pleasure and honor to have with you Elizabeth Arif-Fear, who is the CEO, the founder and CEO of Voice of Salam. It's, as I said, it's a real pleasure because we have been following Elizabeth or Liz, as she likes to be called as well, on Twitter, and I was always amazed by the depth of her tweets and also the openness and the desire really to encompass, all cultures and the diversity in our society. So on the website of Voice of Salam, I did my homework today, so we can read. So that Voice of Salam was founded in 2015 to raise awareness of a range of global issues and advocate for the promotion, protection, and understanding of human rights, interfaith, social, and cultural issues. We are all about exposing injustice, breaking down barriers, and building mutual understanding. We're sharing stories and views, leading campaigns, raising awareness, and creating change. Join us. And actually, it's exactly what we're going to do tonight. So tonight, Liz and I will discuss mainly about Muslim-Jewish relationships, how to promote a vision of a world where diversity is valued and is not considered as a threat, how poetry plays such a central place in a role in your life, what it means to be queer and Muslim. Many questions, obviously, which won't be able to answer all of them tonight, but it's my hope that this is just the start of an ongoing conversation with you and your organization and many other meetings to come. So without further ado, Liz, who are you?
Hi, Renee. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me tonight. It's great to be here. So I suppose looking back as a child, I've always had a sort of fascination with different cultures, getting to know people from different backgrounds. It first started really, although didn't realise at the time, when I started learning French. Was about sort of 10, 11, and I just found the idea of learning another language fascinating. The idea that I would be learning something that somebody uses every day, a way you communicate with other people. So I carried on doing languages, and then in my late teens, I became interested in human rights issues. I wasn't very good at sport, and I found out that we could do voluntary work at sixth form. Now, that wasn't just a skive off gym, but also I thought that's great, doing something positive for the community, something a bit different. So I started doing some voluntary work, and then I found out that there was an amnesty group at school, and I loved it. I really liked doing the campaigns, mobilizing people, raising awareness, leading assemblies and fundraising campaigns. So after that kind of really started my interest in kind of worldly issues around justice, social justice. So I carried on with my studies, but faith wasn't really much of a part of that. I grew up as I would say, sort of semi-practicing cultural Christian. My dad, obviously being part Welsh, part English, there's also Irish background. He grew up in a sort of culturally Christian household, but was more or less an atheist. And my mom, from the Italian side, her side's Italian, she grew up in a Catholic household and then changed to Anglicism, but she taught RE, so she knew a lot about different faiths. But so we had like a mixed background, and faith was important to me, but it was more of a personal thing. It didn't really form much of my identity or how I kind of interacted with other people. But then about 10 years ago, after I'd been studying Arabic and I went to Tunisia and met lots of different people, and I was doing my studies in translation and looking at sort of Iraqi authors and all kinds of different elements that came into play, and I'd been looking at faith and kind of going back to church, I soon realised that my beliefs were more in line with Islam, and I converted to Islam in my early 20s. And not so long after, I moved to Spain to live with my then husband. And that's when I really became more aware of who I was as a Muslim, but also a European woman, somebody that didn't grow up in a sort of minority household. I'm not part of an ethnic minority, so to speak. And I noticed the discrimination in Spain, something that I hadn't really faced in the UK. And the discrimination that was different on a religious basis. So while I was European, but I was also visibly Muslim, I was wearing a headscarf. My ex-husband at the time wasn't visibly Muslim, but he was North African. And that was something that we faced different prejudice. And reflecting on my time there, what it's like to be a migrant in a different country. It was also around the time that Donald Trump was to become president. So there was a lot of talk about Islam, sort of, integration and all these different issues. And while I was in Spain, I felt a bit cut off from voluntary work. I found an amnesty group and I was engaging with refugee organisations. So I thought, okay, well, the virtual world's out there. It's funny now because with Zoom and the pandemic, lots of things have gone online. Wasn't so big back then, but I started doing some voluntary work online and I got connected with the group and I thought, well, I'm going back to the UK. I want to gain some more experience. I need writing experience. And my husband at the time said, why don't you start a blog? I'd never really written before, but I started this blog talking about different human rights issues I'd encountered that I learned about in Spain, such as the organ trafficking of the Falun Gong in China, through activism I was doing in Spain. And then I started writing about interfaith issues. So again, inspired by this, Trump divisive narrative, writing about the commonalities between Muslims and Christians, why we shouldn't be listening to the Donald Trump narrative. And slowly, I realised I had a lot to say, actually, and a lot of experience in different things. So the blog grew. I now have a lovely lady from America, a Jewish American, who runs, she's got a great background in teaching, in learning about different cultures, bringing people together, and she's got such wisdom. So we've been running the organisation with other volunteers in and out for the last couple of years. Moved back to the UK and I realised, okay, that experience in Spain is something that I should use positively in the UK. So I went back to my parents' home. I got involved in a local peace festival, which I think was my first interfaith event, really. And really, it went from there. I loved it. It just seemed like a natural fit. We're still doing human rights-based things, such as refugee work. And then when I moved to London, that was another big step of my journey. So I was in and around London, and for the first time, I was seeing members of the Jewish community who were visibly Jewish. So, for example, Orthodox men with a kippah, or maybe a hat, a suit, peyot, something that I'd never really seen in the Midlands. Obviously, much smaller Jewish communities spread across the UK, outside of the London and Manchester. And I had colleagues at university who were Jewish. But again, I wasn't really engaging with issues around faith back then. But I was curious. I thought, this is a community that's more visible here, that's part of Britain. I don't know much about them. The only kind of experience I had was in sort of anti-Israel activism, which was a part. I didn't do a lot, but I had firm beliefs on that. And I thought, well, one, as a Muslim, we're very close theologically. I should find out more about this community. And also socially, it's important to know who we're living with, to know more about different communities. And I was also curious because I believe that I may have Jewish heritage. That's a long story. Don't think I do. But so I did a quick Google and found that there was a Jewish Muslim women's group at West London Synagogue. And that was a big start of a big journey. Obviously I'd been to churches before and mosques, but I'd never really been to a synagogue before. I was in my early 20s and I'd only been to one synagogue, that was in Marrakesh. Funny enough, I've been to quite a few now. I love exploring Morocco and Jewish Morocco. So I went to the synagogue, West London Synagogue, this is about 3-4 years ago now. And I was nervous. You're worried you're going to embarrass yourself. Are you going to say something wrong? New people, totally different environment for me. And at the same time, with my networks, I'd heard about this great organisation called Nis and Ashim, who were running this women's conference. Now, anything to do with women's issues, I'm on it, love it. Women's spaces, feminist issues. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I was being exposed to all these new ideas. So I went to my first meeting and it was great. And they mentioned the conference. And before I knew it, by the end of the meeting, I was now the co-chair of their new Nis and Ashim group. They'd been a group for around 10 years, and Nis and Ashim had started not that long before, recently at the time, and their model was empowering women and women's leadership. So for each group, you have a Muslim co-chair and a Jewish co-chair. So they had a Jewish co-chair, they had Rabbi Helen. They needed a Muslim woman. So I think they must have thought, oh, this lady seems interested. She's going to the conference. She seemed happy chatting away. So they got me on board. And really, that was the start of something that's become a major part of my life now. I've been involved in Nis and Ashim for, 3-4 years now. Linda and lots of other people here are involved in Nis and Ashim. I met some lovely Jewish friends. I've learned a lot more about the faith. From there, I've engaged more in Jewish education and culture. I went to Limud a couple of years ago. I'm now trustee for Muslims Against Anti-Semitism. We're a UK-based non-profit. The name says it. We're here to fight anti-Semitism. There is a problem with anti-Semitism within the Muslim community and also outside of the Muslim community. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, so I'm trustee for that. I've also got involved with different projects. I'm running Voices Salam, and part of that obviously is Jewish-Muslim relations, sharing stories. I'm trying to do some research into anti-Semitism. Very, very hard to find case studies of people who are willing to admit perhaps where they've expressed hateful views and have changed. I'm still looking for those stories because I think that, everybody has the power to change. Not everybody's hateful. Sometimes it's ignorance. There's a lot of stereotypes out there, and it's always a learning curve. I myself have been through a big, big journey. I was a big sort of anti-Israel person before, but I was, in my mind, that wasn't really part of the Jewish community. It was a separate thing. So I was happily attending all these interfaith events. And then slowly, I learned a lot. And now I'm part of the UK steering committee for the UK Friends of the Bereaved Families Forum. We're the body that support the group over in Israel-Palestine, so working on fundraising and advocacy. And hello to all the listenership people. Involved in lots of different things, but a big interest of mine is Jewish-Muslim relations. And it's funny because before I moved to London, I don't think I'd ever really met anybody Jewish, minus sort of, as I said, one or two colleagues at uni. Now I attend a liberal shul as a friend, I attend festivals, classes, and it's really helped me sort of personally. I've met some great friends. I think it's always good to learn, stretch your boundaries, listen to people, experience new circles. It's helped me understand better what anti-Semitism is, and learning, where I did go wrong, even in the past, where I thought I hadn't expressed anti-Semitic views, learning more and more about that. And I think it's also had a knock-on effect with the people around you. Not everything that you do has to be large scale. I think sometimes the relationships you make with people, that has a knock-off effect in your life. So your friends and your family, they learn what you're involved with, the friendships you're making. And I think that's really important about kind of creating positive change. Everything can start on a small level, building upwards. I think it's those relationships that have really helped me to learn, to appreciate my own faith, and really helped me. So that's a bit about my story. Obviously, if anyone's got any questions. Oh, and the poetry. Along this journey, as a child, I loved writing poetry and had a big gap. And I found that while I loved writing blogs, some of the issues were more emotive. So I think at the time it was it was in Syria, the siege of Eastern Ghouta, where there was essentially a sort of blockade and it was difficult to get aid through. And I've been working in humanitarian aid for the last couple of years. I'm now changing job on Monday. But I was thinking about those issues, and I realised that while writing blogs is a very powerful way of sharing stories, and that's what we do at Voices Salam, poetry enables you to express things on a much deeper level. And that's something that I explored and that really kind of flourished. And I published my first book in 2019. The book covers a lot of different issues, Jewish-Muslim relations as well, but also sort of women's rights, refugee issues. And that's something that I'm now exploring with my second book that I'm working on, which is more personal. It's about women in Islam. So I've really learned the power of words, I think, over the last year, from being someone that barely wrote anything apart from in academia to now being a published poet, a blogger. It's what I do for a profession now, actually. And I think it's the connections that I've made over time that's helped me kind of learn the power of words, the power of people's stories. And whilst I've been doing this, I've met some great people. As you said, you met me on Twitter. Some of the relationships are great. Just seeing those positive stories, showing allyship, solidarity. So, at times when there's been anti-Semitic attacks, showing that you're there for the Jewish community. And likewise, people that have done that for me as a Muslim. And I think it's building those bridges. And that's something that Nissan Hashim really kind of enforced with me and that I've learned personally over the years.
Thank you. Wow, what an amazing life journey. So, as I was listening to I was trying to understand. You're a driven person. I mean, it's just amazing how much you're passionate about what you're doing. What are the underlying values that drive you? What's the foundation of Liz? Your inner life is based on which values? What's so important for you?
I think it's the golden rule, really. And as I said, even though I wasn't brought up in a particular religious background, my dad, who now is vaguely monotheistic, complicated, he always taught me you do what you want in your life, but you don't harm other people. And that kind of idea of the golden rule, you want for other people what you want for yourself. We see that in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And that's something really that's driven me. we all have various degrees of privilege. Well, for example, I live in a safe country. I have a voice. I'm able to express myself freely. Some people in other countries can't do that. They're arrested, or they're in extreme poverty, or they're displaced. And I think I've always thought that while I can, I should do something positive for other people. And that's really a value that my mother instilled in me as well. The idea of charity. I mean, a charity doesn't have to be necessarily money. It could be, acts of goodness. So I think my parents have been a big influence. And as I said, my life as an activist. And then with my faith, I think that helped me more to connect with people on a different level. So, some people have a faith, some people don't. But we've got a wide diversity of faith communities in the UK. And the difference of living in Spain, I've lived in Algeria and the UK. I think the UK is a really wonderfully diverse country. And while there are growing levels of hate, I think generally we're really, really proud of that. And while we're proud of that, though, it does take a conscious effort to stand as an ally. So, when difficult times arise, such as, conflict, you can stand with your friends, you don't become misinformed. There's a lot of, negative bias in the media, etc. So I think the golden rule, really, I wouldn't say so much my religion as a whole, because I've not always been Muslim. But that obviously is an Islamic value, but also, it's a value that lots of people of no faith have as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what's the place of Islam in your life? Because you're defining as a Muslim woman, huh? So
Yeah.
that's really your the definition when you look at your Twitter account, it's Muslim woman. So I have to ask you to forgive my ignorance
No.
about. So I suppose you belong to a mosque where you live. How?
Not specifically. I really struggled to find a mosque where I feel it aligns with my values. I don't really want to badmouth specific mosques, so it's probably not something that I'll talk about in detail. It's quite odd, but I actually feel quite at home in the Jewish community at the moment. I mean, I'm not Jewish. Everybody knows I'm not Jewish. But theologically, the compatibility is there in terms of what I believe. I focus more on sort of, the oneness of God rather than specific histories. So that's socially, theologically, that keeps me grounded. I'm a strong feminist. There are feminist spaces, but unfortunately, I've not always found them welcoming. Obviously, when I converted to Islam, I was me, but looking back, it was difficult to kind of navigate where that fits, and I became quite strict. I would say, always open-minded, always kind, etc. But I would say I kind of went with the sort of mainstream Orthodox kind of perspective. That's been quite a big journey. I wore a headscarf for about 8 years. I loved wearing it. That was definitely my decision. Nobody forced me to wear it. But now I love not wearing it, and I don't want to ever wear it again. So with full respect to my hijabi sisters, that's been a big thing for me. I feel like now, after, I suppose, when you first enter religion, it's like you're a baby, you've got to learn, you've got to find your place. And now, after about a decade, I feel like I finally know kind of who I am and have the confidence to be me without really feeling that I have to adhere to sort of specific standards or traditions. For me, it's more about the theological principles, and I try and take a more holistic view than, a kind of orthodox standpoint. So yeah, I see myself as a progressive Muslim.
Mm-hmm. I guess the Muslim community is as diverse as the Jewish community. So you have all the different segments from the very ultra orthodox to the progressive and the liberals, like in the Jewish world. And one of the great things about this country is that you can find actually a place for you wherever you go, where you look. There's always somewhere where you can actually find somewhere when you can fulfill all your potentials. But I'd like to go back now to your poetry, because are you happy to share a poem or two with us today? Okay, thank you, Liz.
So wait 1 second. Okay, so as I said, a big kind of theme of mine is gender equality. Not just women's issues, but also kind of promoting a positive masculinity for men and kind of, that can replace this toxic masculinity. I think that's important. Where do men fit in? As allies, we need male allies, and also people obviously who are non-binary, and also, that sense of positive masculinity. We're not demonizing men, but it's about empowering everybody. So there's quite a few poems, as you'd expect, in the book that are about women. This poem is called Fragile, and it was inspired by somebody who meant well, but it was quite offensive. So I'm not going to name names, but they were of North African backgrounds, and we were having a conversation about men and women. And I'd said that I'd lived abroad in Spain, and he said, yes, but you managed to do that because you were with your husband. Well, I actually moved before I was with my husband. And I just kind of got this impression that, women aren't quite as empowered as men. I mean, sometimes that's practically true because they're not given the means to be able to live the life they need to live. But he sort of mumbled, well, women are fragile. And I thought, oh dear. I didn't say anything at the time. And the thing is, he didn't mean any harm. It's a stereotype that women need their husbands to protect them. But then I got home and I thought, oh no, this just doesn't work. And my husband at the time was like, well, he didn't mean any harm. I was like, well, that doesn't matter. So, I've not said this to his face. Instead, I wrote a poem and let it out that way. Fragile. Women. Women are fragile, he tells me. Fragile. Delicate, fragile, and weak. Like a blossom in a blushing, subtle shade of pink. Gently swaying in the wind, so soft and sweet, who will always fall so gracefully at their feet. Women. Women are precious, he tells me. Precious. Precious, beautiful and rare, like a sparkling pearl in its shell, so divine, with the beauty so dazzling and glowingly fair, she must be concealed and to men never ever left bare. Women. Women are difficult, he tells me. Difficult. Difficult, unpredictable, an enigma of the mind. Like the glowing desert and the burning sand, she's a tease who turns innocent men blind through her mirage, illusions, and fashioning of time. Women. Well, I say, I'm not a delicate blossom, a precious hidden pearl, or the burning hot sand. I am a rose so brightly red like the burning passion of fire, a rose so bright, vibrant like the strength of my beating heart rising higher and higher. I am a rose with thorns, strong, prickly and sharp, ready to rip the flesh of any man who threaten to tear my soul apart. No, I'm not fragile, precious, or difficult to read. I'm a woman of strength, not a womb for your seed. So take heed and do not seek to conceal me, silence me, or dampen my spirit. I am not a mere vessel of your imaginary inner limit.
What powerful words! Oh gosh, it's so it's interesting because we had all these conversations among progressive rabbis recently about feminism and what it means, for male rabbis, to have a very strong feminist voice. And as you said, there's I guess we need now to rethink what being a man means, in the light of feminism, which was a liberation movement. It was women who was, as you said, no, I'm not fragile. I'm not a little, like a potiche you can put somewhere and pat on the head and just shut up. You have no voice. So that we need to go out of that. But then the men have to think about where they stand. So what does it mean to have a more equal relationship? Because I guess it's all about power between genders and power in a relationship. And we will get there when we agree that there's no imbalance of power. We are all on the same level. I loved your poem so much. I think, Liz, it was really good, and it really echoed a lot of my reflection at the moment about the relationship between men and women. Because, I was born in 65, so a long time ago now, and my mother divorced when I was very young. So I was brought up in the 70s in France, where divorce was very, very rare, and I was probably one in my classroom to be the child of a divorcee. And I saw my mother, a single woman, struggling just to be accepted, as a single woman with a child. It was really, really hard for her. And I guess
really difficult, yeah.
Sorry?
That must have been really difficult.
It was really difficult. And she really, really suffered. And I developed a very strong sense of feminism from that point, when I saw how unfair the world was and how nasty the men could be to her because of that.
It's funny because one of my best friends, who I say is one of the best feminists I know, he's a bloke, and he also grew up with his mother when as a single parent at a time, and I think that bond where you see the struggles that your mother's gone through, I think that's really important, and obviously that's shaped both of your sort of views on this, definitely.
Absolutely, yes. And then having two daughters who are now in their late 20s, early 30s, and seeing, even today, young women still, they're not always respected by men. And there's a lot of work to do. So really, your poem is really very timely.
Thank you. And I think some of it is also putting women on this pedestal. So this man who made the comment about women being fragile, as I said, the thing about the pearl, that is referring to religious narratives where, oh, you're a precious pearl, you need to be hidden away. So it's not just, the things that we see about violence, blatant misogyny, harsh language, etc. It's also about just putting women on this pedestal in a different, like you said, the power dynamic, like, oh, well, we need to look after the women, they need to be taken care of. So yeah, as you said, it's about those power dynamics, and men and women we all need to be, on the same power dynamic, the same level, really. We're all equal. We all should be free to do as we wish.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Liz. I can see that, we have many people on the call, and maybe someone wants to ask a question. Do we have someone on the Zoom? Or if you are on, on Facebook, you can always also ask a question if you want. Do we have anyone wanted to ask a question on the call? Just unmute yourself and ask.
I'd like to ask a question.
I would too.
Yeah, Philip, please go on. Yes.
Naturally.
And Phyllis, I think, as well.
Hello.
You described yourself as a female in that brilliant poem, and I think I learned a lot there. Have you written a poem describing how a male should or would be?
I haven't, but that's a very, very good idea, because as we were saying, part of this whole, thing is about what men should be, or they shouldn't be, or they don't have to be. I've written about that, the idea that men should be able to cry and men should be able to express themselves. But I haven't written a poem about it. That's a very good idea, actually. I might steal the idea.
And the poem will be called Philip.
Well, if I do write it, I'm going to write that name down now. I will dedicate it to you, Philip.
1 L, please. 1 L.
Yeah.
1 L. And
there we are. I've written it down. I'll put it in my notes.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Philip. I think it's an interesting one. Yes. Yeah.
I'll go mute now before I really.
Yeah. Because I guess, when I was listening to you, Liz, it's all about relationship, connection, sharing narratives, and discovering that the person who is, in front of me is, as we say in Hebrew, created B'Tselem Elohim, created in God's image, and therefore has exactly, the same. It's not even about rights, or what would be the best way to talk. Legitimacy in a way, huh?
Yeah.
And sharing all these questions. I just wanted to share with you, when I lived in Israel, I really wanted to understand the situation there. So I went to visit a village of settlers in the West Bank because I wanted to understand their narrative. So I went to a village where there were some French settlers, which was easier for me to sometimes good to speak your own language. And I spent the day with a rabbi and his wife and, having a lunch with other people there. And I was really moved by them. I was really moved by their narrative, what they said about the connection to the land, etc. But there was a big chunk missing, the Palestinian village opposite the valley. And I said, what about them? Because they live here and they were not part of the narrative. And I guess when you erase part of humanity from your narrative, then we have problems.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody, I think, intentionally erases. I mean, like sometimes, like I said, before I moved to London, I'd never had any Jewish friends. So whilst I thought I knew about the religion and my views on Israel was something else, in retrospect, they were really ignorant and, they weren't well informed. So I think sometimes people, deliberately, other times it's just a case of perhaps he just hadn't thought about it really. Maybe he thought he couldn't understand. Sometimes it's not intentional. Obviously, that's a particular context, which is quite heated. Perhaps he just wasn't able to understand if it's, far from his reality. Yeah. I mean, listening to the other narrative doesn't mean you have to agree necessarily.
Oh, yes.
I think you're starting from a point of, this is how I feel and this is how I experience things. And then the same for the other person. And then even just communicating that is a vital step.
Yes. Okay. Can I ask you another poem, Liz? Can I be a bit greedy because I really love your poetry? Yeah, thank you.
I'll try and pick a non-feminist one. Okay, so I'm going to read one called Family Reunion. Now, the last bit is sort of alternating in a bit of Hebrew, which I'll pronounce very badly, and a bit of Arabic. So I'll read that and then I'll just read the translation afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. Family reunion. A brother you've never met, a sister you don't greet. For these are the sacred family of whom we never speak. We share the same forefather, one blossoming family tree, and so many similar habits, if only you could see. They love our single God, no partners to him aside, but ashamed to unite together, we stand apart with pride. They call to the sacred land, a land of peace unknown. Here too we used to bow in thanks, in worship to him alone. The prodigal brother and sister, estranged in daily life. Yes, this has been a family who face such utter strife. Baruch atah Adonai, Rabbi Alameen, Boker v'Ivrim, Idina Sarat Mustaqim. Now the last bit alternates between using Surah Al-Fatiha, which is the opening verse of the Quran, which is recited during every prayer. It's a really, really important verse. And then something from the morning blessings, which I taught, which I thought really fitted in with the meaning of that prayer and the kind of the rhyme. So the last bit translates in Hebrew, blessed are you, Lord, in Arabic, Lord of the worlds, Hebrew, who opens the eyes of the blind, and in Arabic, guide us to the straight path. So Surah Al-Fatiha is all about kind of following the straight path to the one God, keeping us on that path, on the straight path. And I just felt that the bit with the Hebrew about opening our eyes to the blind and, our Lord, I thought those two pieces really fitted together. It's a bit tricky, obviously, because I'm reading the translation. It's usually, obviously, with a footnote at the bottom. But yeah, that poem was inspired because I wanted to write something about Jewish-Muslim relations, Israel-Palestine, but it's a conflict. It's a big issue. And really, I just wanted to focus on something positive and the fact that, so obviously that poem is written from the perspective of a Muslim, reflecting on how, the trauma that the Jewish community have been through, how as Muslims we used to pray facing Jerusalem. So reflecting on those similarities. And we are a family, we're an Abrahamic family, but how often is that really talked about? More now than it was. But obviously, it's not a religious conflict, but there is division that happens in the UK. We've seen, in the last escalation of conflict, for example, the rise in anti-Semitism, and there was anti-Muslim incidents. So unfortunately, it does affect communities here at home. So I just wrote that poem just to kind of remind us that we have more in common that divides us, and just to focus on something positive, really.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah.
Sorry for the awful Hebrew pronunciation.
It was really good, actually. It was really, really good. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's always an element of dysfunctionality in any families, and it's not surprising that in the Abrahamic group of religions, it's actually quite dysfunctional, especially now. You mentioned earlier in your first intervention how your views on Israel have shifted from one position of anti-Israel to something different today. Can you tell us a bit more where you stand now, and what was this big shift?
So I apologise in advance if I offend anybody, but I've learnt my lesson. So I didn't really know much about the Jewish community, but, you know, I fully respect them. I thought, great, they're part of the Abrahamic family, they're a community, we should respect a religious community. I obviously came from a background where there's usually a particular narrative. You don't hear the Jewish kind of history so much, very minimal Holocaust education. You don't hear much about Israeli history or anything. So that kind of left-wing activism usually has a particular kind of stance. So I won't go into too much detail, but if anyone's got any questions, just ask me. So I didn't really know the other side, so to speak. I saw it very much as a one-sided thing. But as I said, in my mind, I'd sort of separated them as in, you know, being Jewish is nothing to do with that per se. I'm not really sure exactly how I did that, but I thought, well, that's a political thing. And, you know, being Jewish is religious. And obviously I'd seen images of the new Tricarta and thought, well, you know, that doesn't make me anti-Semitic, etc., etc. So with all the best intentions in the world, but as I said, I was really intrigued about interfaith relations. As I said, in my mind, two different things. We've got a political thing and a religious community. So I started all these interfaith activities, obviously still unsure about Israel, but slowly I developed friendships and managed to actually have some really, really frank conversations, and I learned a lot. And having those conversations was incredible. And as I said to you on the phone when we chatted this morning, meeting people who are identified openly as Zionists, who were just beautiful people, wonderful, so kind, so nice. And, you know, from my background in the Muslim community, I've had a lot of experience in sort of Maghrebi, the Arab world, the activist world. You know, the word Zionism is seen as the bad word, the dirty word. That's the ultimate bad. But I was meeting people who were openly identifying as Zionists. I thought, well, hang on a minute. But she identifies as a Zionist and she's a lovely person. So it makes you reflect, really. Because I met another person and we were at this interfaith event and he was like, oh, thank you for coming. And I'm a Zionist, but of course, you know, I support Palestinians as well. And I just started to get really confused. But I just spent more and more time listening to people, learning, and slowly, and obviously, you know, attended events where they have this parallel narrative, so you can see, you know, where everyone's coming from. And I don't think there was one moment, so to speak, but it's quite a big change, actually, because I now do identify as Zionist, which if I think for people who are Zionists, that's fine. It's not a particularly loaded term. But for people who are perhaps unclear of the word Zionist, that might come up with all kinds of ideas. But, you know, you could be religious Zionist, conservative, liberal, progressive. It basically means I think Israel has the right to exist where it currently exists, but I also do believe in a two-state solution. So, you know, one state of Palestine and one state of Israel. But ultimately, I do believe, I mean, let's not talk for ages about this, that it's up to Israelis and Palestinians to decide what's best for them, because I'm neither Palestinian nor Israeli. But obviously, I went from one very strong position of thinking Israel shouldn't have existed. I'm not really sure what I wanted to happen. I suppose I don't really know, but not agreeing with it having been created, to now a completely different perspective. And sometimes I do sit back and think, gosh, things have changed so much over the years. It's quite incredible. But I've learned a lot. As I said, you know, I had some Holocaust education, but I think not enough. I don't think we really learn enough about pre-Holocaust persecution in the Middle East, identity of Jews all across the globe. So, you know, Mizrahi Jews, Sephardi Jews, as well as Ashkenazi Jews, the whole kind of spectrum, the history of the Jewish community, the culture, the history. I didn't really know anything about their history in the Holy Land, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I really knew very little. And then in terms, I still don't know enough, a lot, but in terms of the conflict itself, you know, I spoke to various people, I did some more research, and yeah, I realized it's a lot more complicated. And there were also some quite sad moments where think I potentially embarrassed myself, but people knew I meant well. It's been a learning curve, and now it's just completely different. And I think it's really helped me to understand this idea of narratives. People see the world a certain way based on their experiences. And you've got to listen to each and every one. Doesn't mean you've got to agree, but you've got to understand their feelings and see where you can kind of meet in between. So yeah, I was very anti-Israel. Now I'm a Zionist. I'm planning, hopefully my next holiday will be to Israel, going with friends. That should be good. Really excited. It'll be my first kind of post-COVID actual international trip. So yeah, sometimes you look back and you think, gosh, things have really changed. But I think that's good. Change is good. If we were just the same person all the time, I don't think we'd really be learning things or meeting people. We'd be stuck in our own sort of little bubble. I'm still fairly young. There's still lots of things to learn. I've met different people, still many people to learn, things to learn and people to meet. So yeah, very anti-Israel, and now I identify as Zionist. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. I wish more people were like you. I mean, on all sides, the capacity to accept, that, to change your views, and from quite an extreme view to something much more moderate. And very often when I look at the anti-Israel narrative, first, I guess, as you said, ignorance. Probably 90% of people have no idea what's happening there, and they're using the conflict as a way to channel some of the frustration they have here and now, because there's a lot of prejudice and inequalities, and using the Palestinian cause is probably for some of them a way to fight back against, I don't know, against what, the Jews may be presented as a kind of all powerful and very rich. I mean, I wish the the idea of Jews being rich was true. I really wish this was true. Anyway, that's wishful thinking. But I have to say that I can tell you that before living in Israel, I had quite strong views as well. I thought, come on, guys, you can do better than that. We're Jewish, and we should be able to do better than that. And it's true. I mean, there are a lot of things happening there that are on both sides that are really unacceptable. And then I moved to Israel, and what I discovered there was the complexity. How complex the situation is, how complex it is to live in this part of the world where you have these cultures that collide in a way. You have the Zionist movement from the origin, which was very European, but now you have a large part of the Israeli population that is Mizrahi or North African, so they're much more in line with the Arab population of Israel, and also the fact that people live alongside with each other in Israel without violence most of the time. I mean, there are sometimes surge of violence. So I guess I would say to people, go there and look what's happening there, because I think that's the best way to realize that the conflict is probably is imported here based on a lack of knowledge of the situation. Yeah. Before we go to the next part, is there any question from our friends who are here on the call? I can see online. So we have Ronnie Rosberg from California. Loves your poem. Yeah, wow. Did you know Ronnie?
She volunteers with me at Voice of Salam. She writes blogs.
Ah, okay, Ronnie. Good. Thank you for coming from. And Halima Krausen. Wow. Sheikh Halima Krausen. Yeah, really good to have you. David Mele from Lyon. Eres Kaplan from Guildford. Yes. Oh, all these friends. Jason Brown from Dublin. So we've got an audience all over the world. So welcome to you all. Is there anyone who want to ask a question? Just unmute yourself, maybe, and because I can't see all of you. Gosh, guys, you're really silent for once, huh?
René?
Yes, please go on. Yes.
I wanted to ask
in your journey.
Wait.
Oh, okay. Sandra, we have Fleur first, and then I'll go to you. I'll go back to you. Yes.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Liz, what do you think has added to your perspective, your change in view about Israel being the bad guy, being involved with the Bereaved Families Forum has played?
Yeah, that played a big part. But obviously, before I got involved with that, my views had already changed because, as I said before, I didn't want to be involved with any Israeli stuff. So that already, I think, was already at that point where I understood their work. Because before I got involved with the committee, I interviewed Bassem and I've forgotten her name. Yeah, that's it. I know her very well, but I think I'm getting old forgetting. So I interviewed them for a blog. And obviously, I was working on that with a Jewish colleague. And, we had to put it fairly across, Israel's security concerns and obviously the Palestinians' concerns about, no occupation. So already at that point, I was kind of understanding of both narratives and histories. And I didn't get to see all the event because I was busy doing other things, but Robbie came over to the Nisanashim conference a while back. I can't think what year that was now. Unfortunately, a Palestinian colleague, I don't think, could get a visa. So already I'd kind of been listening and attending things, and I found other organizations. So obviously by the time that I wanted to be part of that committee, I was already there, so to speak. Had I actually seen things like that before, that may have changed my view, because I didn't really, it sounds terrible, but I didn't really, obviously in any war, everyone suffers, but my whole view was the Palestinians are suffering because of the Israelis. And within that narrative, you don't really think about Israelis and their daily life and their suffering and their, legitimate concerns. I didn't really know about that. I didn't know anything about Israelis. I thought they were selfish, sorry to say, that why are they living there? Horrible thing to say now. So already to be at that point is quite, to be, working with them, obviously fully on board and support their activities. As I said, I don't really know when the first kind of moment was that things started changing. I think it was just a kind of gradual approach, really. A lot about kind of Holocaust education, understanding the personal relationship that the Jewish community in Britain have, so family and friends, understanding the hurt it causes them when things happen, understanding how they relate to it, how it's part of them, how it's their safety. Yeah, so I think by the time I was obviously doing things with the Bereaved Families Forum, I obviously, was fully on board with it. So that was definitely part of it. But I can't remember sort of like the first moment. I think it was really a conversation I had with a friend, just more about kind of the history of the conflict and land. And I don't know, it's all a bit of a blur, because I think it's just been quite a long journey, really. I don't think there was one light bulb moment, so to speak. I think more knowing and caring about people and knowing that they were nice people, so therefore having to readjust, well, what does Zionism mean based on that? And then the history of persecution, so why would you need an Israel? And also now understanding the kind of historical religious link to Israel. So I can't really think of an exact moment. Sorry if that's a bit of a vague answer. But as I said, to be working with them where I'm acknowledging both narratives, I was already, I'd already changed at that point. Perhaps, wasn't as comfortable, wasn't sure if I was a Zionist, so to speak, but I'd obviously already changed to a certain degree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so it was a gradual incremental change, and bringing new elements and new data in your thought process. Yes. Sandra, I think you had a question.
Yes, I'd like to ask you, Elizabeth. Initially, you said you believed in Islam, and you sort of followed the Islamic path.
Yeah.
Was that initially? Did you find similarities when you understood Judaism? Did you see similarities between the two?
Oh, good.
What encouraged you to go more towards sort of Judaism?
Well, I'm not planning on converting to Judaism, just to clarify. I just like being a Jewish person.
We would welcome you.
I believe in the Torah and everything, but I just have additional beliefs that make me not Jewish. Yes, definitely. Definitely lots of things in common. And that's something in interfaith spaces that, we talk about a lot. And obviously, attending the synagogue as I do, for me, it's not just I'm going to sit here and sort of passively look at things. It's a learning, it helps me with my work, it helps, socially, it's nice to meet people. But I do also think that, like, theologically, I do connect with that. Obviously, some of it's not mine and I don't connect with it so much. But some of it I do, like the Shema is perfectly in line with like the Islamic Shahada. It's pretty much the same belief. I mean, the way I kind of focus on Islam is the kind of the core belief of God being one and part of the Abrahamic tradition, rather than focusing sort of on later Islamic history, the core messaging. So definitely things in common. I've learned a lot about Judaism. As a Muslim, it helps me because, I mean, the principles of this, a lot of them are the same. The importance of giving charity. When we discuss different things about, I don't know, prayer, the way it's discussed really helps me. For example, there was one class and we had to look at different images. Where are you with prayer? And I was able to be really honest about me. There was different pictures, some more positive, some more about struggling, some more about light, It's given me a perspective where I think the dialogues, as I said, I'm not trying to badmouth my religious community, but it's a lot more open, at least in the shul that I attend, in terms of how we approach things in a non-literal way, a bit more holistically and more open to debate as it currently stands. So that's helped me as a Muslim and definitely, fits in line with the core beliefs, of course, yeah.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
Sandra, you're on mute, yes.
What you do?
So you are Muslim, aren't you?
So
I'm still Muslim.
You are Muslim.
Yeah.
That's what you.
You came from
you
a
regard
Christian.
yourself.
Well, you came from a Christian past.
Yeah, I mean, I did believe I was Christian. I did identify as Christian, but I wasn't particularly practicing. I think I was more focused on, I suppose, culturally Christian, believed in a God, started going back to church, but then struggled with the concept of the Trinity and where Jesus fitted in. And didn't consider Judaism at the time because of the role of Jesus. So, kind of went from there.
Thank you. I think we're going to draw our conversation to a close for tonight.
That was so quick.
Yeah, no, it's almost 9 o'clock.
Hours.
So, let's continue this conversation another time. I really want, KLS will be your home whenever you want to come.
Thank you. I'd love to pop in. Yeah, I still haven't been. I think you had an event with Muslims Against Anti-Semitism quite a while back, but I think I was busy doing something.
So,
yes, I would love to pop in.
So it was just before COVID. We had Muslim Against Anti-Semitism. We had I don't remember his name. I'm very bad with names.
Imam
I'm sorry
Mamadou.
about it. Yes, Imam Mamadou.
Oh, he's amazing. He inspires me a lot.
Yeah.
He's lovely.
So it was a very nice moment. We had a nice chat, and a few months before we had the solutions, not sides.
Yeah.
So we had a young Israeli woman and a young Palestinian woman talking about their lives without any judgment about what happened to them, and it was really, really, really good to have you tonight. Thank you for all of you who came from all over the world and from KLS and from Nissan Hashim. I know that there are a few members here, and to be continued. And thank you so much, Liz, for. We've got many other topics to cover, so we'll
talk for hours.
Yeah, I mean it's good. It's good to talk. It's better to talk for hours than to be silent and to
especially in this COVID world. Yeah,
exactly. We need each other. Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you all of you on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
Just looking at some of the comments, I would love to come to the synagogue. Thanks everybody for your questions, for attending. If you're more interested in the book, here it is. It's on Amazon.
I think we'll invite you for a reading one day. So we will do that. We'll invite you for a reading, and you can bring some copies to sell as well if you have at the moment. I think it's nice. We do love this, especially in the evening, more intimate moment, and poetry is really this kind of moment when we can be together. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, Ronnie, great job. And I think we're going to stop being